This is the supplement to the main message. So if you haven't watched the main message, can I recommend you do that first and then decide if you want to come back to this video recording. Suggest you have a Bible open at Luke chapter 12 and at verse 13. Thereabouts. If you don't have a Bible, you can find Luke chapter 12 by asking a search engine to find it for you. And I'd just like to go back over some of the points, as it were, and give a little bit more of the background to the thing. This is a section which I took as a whole, which is very often separated. The parable of the rich fool is very often in churches just separated, and we read as a completely separate section, sometimes helped by the editors of our Bibles to split it. Whereas in fact, this is a continuous thread about the place of possessions and of wealth, and very importantly for the coronavirus time, what you think matters, what counts, what are you really trying to live by, trying to live for, in the light of the fact that a day comes when tomorrow is not for you. And so Jesus encourages us to live in the present and to live for what actually counts. He's in the middle of teaching when a man in the crowd interrupts the flow, in effect, and asks Jesus to judge between himself and his brother in a dispute over inherited land, probably because they are looking to separate a piece of land which would normally have been held together, and is the family inherited land for the future, etc. And so Jesus responds to this in two ways. First of all, he says, I'm not qualified. That is a job for properly appointed rabbis. People did call Jesus rabbi or teacher, um, but he wasn't a formally appointed rabbi. So and he seems to say, I'm not qualified, I'm not appointed for this. But more importantly, what Luke helps us see is that Jesus is saying, but anyway, why would I spend my energy and time encouraging you to think an unhelpful way when I'm here to save you from that stuff? So instead of doing what you've asked me to do, I'm going to suggest you were misplaced to ask it at all. And I'm going to use your mistake to help all of us here rethink about how to live life. He says, look, you need to be on your guard against all kinds of greed. And so it's verse 15, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A person's life does not consist in the abundance of their possessions. And he goes on to tell them the parable which we had in the reading and covered in the main message. Word greed, well, I think here it means that negative appetite which pays too much attention to the wrong things, where we look for our security in what we lay up for tomorrow. Oh yeah, excuse me. Yeah, where we don't worry about those kinds of things. We look instead to what's truly important, and where we don't find our significance in being wealthier than other people or having bigger and better whatever, etc. Bling is not the way forward for a meaningful and satisfying and worthwhile life. Here is a guy in the story, the parable, who has he congratulates himself. He thinks he's done so well, He seems to ignore the fact that he's got all this wealth from a tremendous harvest. I mean, yes, he'll have worked. That's going to be beyond question. But there's an awful lot in that that has to do with the sun and the rain and the soil and probably other people's labour, etc. But anyway, he feels very full of himself. He congratulates the place he's arrived at in life. Says, in fact, I no longer need to work. I'm prepared for a very profitable life for the rest of my time, etc. I'm in such a great place. And that's where God interrupts and says, no, you have prepared for tomorrow, but not for eternity. You've prepared for tomorrow, and tomorrow is not going to come to you. Eternity is, for which you are totally unready. Jesus goes on from this to talk about setting aside the wrong appetites, readjusting our lives. And I was saying in the main presentation, the coronavirus period is such a good one for the purpose of resetting our priorities. Not a good period of time, but it is an appropriate time for us to notice the things that matter and reset our sense of values, etc. So Jesus says a number of things. So if you go to verse 23, where he says, following up, he says, look, stop worrying, basically. Doesn't mean anxiety is a sin. That's not the point. The point is, stop obsessing about the things that are not profitable for you to waste your energy on. Even the basics. So the rich man in the story that he's just told has a great abundance. Jesus now turns his attention to those who don't have abundance, but who are in great need on a daily basis of the basics of food and clothing, both of which took a lot more earning in his culture than they do in the one I'm living in. So he says, no, live in the moment, live in trust. Don't put goods in God's place in such a way that you then fail to love your neighbour as yourself. So stop the idolatry of putting anything in the place of God, and consequently you will be released and free, and you will be able to love your neighbour whose need is just as important as your own need. 3 points, convenient for preachers, come up in verses 23, 24, 25. Here they are in summary. Life is more than these things which you're worried about. Even the basic essentials that you do need. But life is about so much more than those. Verse 24. Consider the ravens, they don't sow, reap, they have no storeroom, diddly pom. God feeds them. The right place for your focus is God's provision of the basics. It is better to place your trust in God's system, in God's provisions on the good earth, than in the mighty dollar or the mighty pound or whatever it is that you're so obsessed about for wealth and for security and for significance. And worry about those things. God provides. There is food. There is clothing, and God knows that you need them. If you make a different priority, you can just trust God for those things. And then in verse 25, anyway, why worry? Because worry is unproductive. So why burn up your energy, your life, your emotion, worrying about what's not worth it? As I said, it doesn't mean that anxiety is a sin. There's this horrible trap which Christians can get into, where they go, oh, anxiety is a sin. I must be a really bad sinner. And you just get more and more anxious because you've now added anxiety about your anxiety. Etc. No, that's not it. He's calling us out of that kind of anxiousness and say, actually, you would be relieved of quite a lot of it if you focused on what's important and trusted God instead of these other things that you're trusting. I love the point at verse 32 where he having sort of encouraged them to switch their value system and consider other things more important, etc. He says this in conclusion, and I'd like to leave it with this. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, treasure in heaven that will not be exhausted, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And that last bit, you see, just so clever. Just says, if you make the investment, the heart that you so long to be godly will follow. Do the right thing, invest yourself in the kingdom of God and its actions upon earth, and your heart will follow your action, which is the other way round to how we sometimes see it, and indeed how Jesus sometimes taught it. Do not be afraid, little flock. Your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Think if we will allow these kinds of thoughts to permeate for us at this time, get deep inside of us, we can use this tragic, awful and challenging time of the coronavirus to come out of it with our values remembered, reset, restored, and ready to make a better job of life. And I hope and pray we all have the tomorrow in which to put these lessons to work. God bless you.